Chapter 1. The First War is Within. Fade in. The sound of a distant storm rolling across a black horizon. The screen is still. Then the voice enters, low, steady, and filled with quiet fire. There is a war that no army will fight for you. A war that leaves no scars the world can see, but one that devours men from the inside out. This war begins in the shadows behind your eyes, and if you're not careful, it ends there too. This is the first war. The war for the mind. Before a man ever builds an empire, before a woman shapes a legacy, before greatness walks, it first learns to stand in the battlefield of thought. History remembers Edison for the light bulb, but it forgets the thousands of failures he buried beneath his own will. Not because he never doubted, but because he refused to let the voice of doubt become his master. Before Carnegie gave the world steel, he had to temper his own soul, to break the brittle bones of mediocrity inside himself. Before Ford assembled the machine, he disassembled the limiting beliefs that told him, "That's impossible." That voice exists in all of us. The question is, who is in control? The mind is not your enemy, but it is not your ally until it is trained. It is a wild horse. Muscle without direction, speed without control. It will run from fear, chase illusion, collapse under pressure, but it can also carry you through deserts of doubt and over mountains of failure if you learn to hold the reins. To control your mind is not to silence it, but to become the conductor of its chaos. You must rise, not as a beggar asking for peace, but as a king reclaiming a stolen throne. The mind will lie to you. It will tell you that you are tired when you are only afraid. It will whisper that you are not enough, because it is afraid of what happens when you realize you are. You will hear it most in the silence. When the world quiets, and you are alone with your reflection. That's when the war begins. Not when you're failing, but when you've stopped trying. Not when they doubt you, but when you believe them. Understand this. Every empire ever built began first in the solitude of an unshaken mind. Napoleon once said, "The battlefield is a scene of constant chaos. The winner will be the one who controls that chaos." But the battlefield he truly mastered was internal. The strategy was not just with soldiers, but with his own focus. Clarity is not granted. It is earned. And belief is not something you find. It is something you forge. You must become the blacksmith of your own thoughts, taking raw emotion, white-hot and unshaped, and hammering it against the anvil of discipline, until it becomes the weapon that serves you. Let me tell you something the world won't. You are not a prisoner of your thoughts. You are their architect. And every moment you spend waiting for permission, every second you surrender to fear or impulse, you are laying bricks in a prison only you can see, but you can also tear it down. Most people drift through life like a feather in the wind, pulled by distraction, tossed by anxiety, living not by intention, but by reaction. And then they wonder why they feel powerless. Why purpose feels so far away. Why they can't seem to move forward. But you are not here to drift. You are here to direct the current, to grab the wheel, to take control. To master your mind is not a moment. It is a practice. It is the repetition of choice. Again and again and again. When doubt rises, you meet it with clarity. When fear speaks, you speak louder with conviction. And when distraction knocks, you slam the door with discipline. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat still with your own thoughts? Not to scroll, not to numb, but to listen? To hear the patterns, the habits, the hidden beliefs that run beneath the surface? Do you even know who you are beneath the noise? Have you ever commanded your mind to silence and listen to what remains? Because in that silence, there is power. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, they knew that the greatest battles were not fought with swords or shields, but with reason over impulse. Their enemy was not the world, but themselves, and their weapon was the mind. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And how true it is. We die 1,000 deaths in thought, while living only once in truth. We become so hypnotized by what if, that we forget what is. We are afraid of failing, So we never begin. We are afraid of judgment. So we shrink into false versions of ourselves, watered down, bent-backed, spine-silenced shadows. And still we wonder why we feel empty. Because your mind was never meant to be passive. It was designed to be a forge. To test, to challenge, to question. But also to create. To dream. To believe. To build. The question is not whether the mind is powerful. The question is, who commands that power, you or the world? Because if you don't control your mind, it will be controlled by everyone else. By ads designed to hijack your attention. By algorithms designed to addict you. By voices that don't know your name but want to shape your story. You must reclaim it. This is a revolution. And it begins inside you. There is no hack. No shortcut. Only the hard path. The ancient path. Walked by warriors and kings. Inventors and poets. Rebels and dreamers who refused to bow to fear. Walt Disney was told he lacked imagination. He didn't argue. He built a world out of imagination itself. Abraham Lincoln faced failure after failure. Elections lost, businesses collapsed, personal grief that could have destroyed him. But he never lost the battle within. Because that's what separates the remembered from the forgotten. Not talent, not timing, not luck, but mental sovereignty. The ability to stand when everything inside wants to kneel. So stand now. Stand, not just physically, but philosophically. Plant your flag in your own mind. And say, this belongs to me. Not my doubt. Not my past. Not my fear. This is not motivation. This is metamorphosis. And the cocoon breaks only when the mind is ready. Not when it's convenient. Not when it's easy. But when you are willing to shed the old skin, the excuses, the lies, the false identities, and fight, not against the world, but for yourself. This is the first chapter, the first battle, the first flame, is waiting to be written. Chapter 2, Mindset is the foundation of all reality. You wake up every day inside the same machine, and yet most people will spend their entire lives never learning how to operate it. The mind is not just a part of your experience. It is the filter through which every experience is shaped. It is the architect of your perceptions, the sculptor of your beliefs, the invisible force that bends the world to match your internal blueprint. Before you ever take a step in the physical world, your mind has already taken 10, either toward your future or away from it. Mindset is not a motivational catchphrase. It's not a poster on a wall or a quote you see once and forget 5 minutes later. Mindset is the core software of your being, and if you do not rewrite it, it will run loops created by others, by your childhood, by your environment, by systems that were never designed for your greatness. You cannot build a life of excellence on a foundation of inherited limitation. You must question everything. You must be willing to tear down the walls of your current beliefs and stare into the rubble of your own comfort. The truth is this: your mind is not set, it is forged. And everything you believe today is a product of repetition, emotion, and environment. That means it can be reshaped. It means that with the right pressure, with enough awareness, you can rewire everything you once thought was permanent. You are not your past. You are not your patterns. You are not the story someone else wrote for you when you were too young to know the pen was in your hand. Think of every person who changed the world. Think of Mandela, who sat in a prison cell for 27 years and still walked out a free man in his mind. Think of Helen Keller, who could neither see nor hear, and yet developed a mind more vivid than most who had full access to the senses. Think of Viktor Frankl, locked inside the gates of Auschwitz, stripped of identity, possessions, family, yet somehow discovering in that dark place the eternal truth, that no one can take from you the final human freedom, the ability to choose your response to any given set of circumstances. That power, that sovereignty, that unbreakable core, it does not come from the outside. It is built in the crucible of choice. And that choice begins the moment you decide to see your mind not as a mirror, reflecting reality, but as a lens that shapes it. You must stop treating your thoughts as gospel. You must stop accepting every emotion as truth. The way you feel is not always the way things are. Emotion is not evidence. Feeling afraid does not mean you are in danger. Feeling unworthy does not mean you lack worth. The brain is an ancient machine built for survival, not happiness. Its default setting is fear. Its default state is suspicion. It will convince you that the worst is always around the corner, not because it is evil, but because it evolved to keep you alive, not fulfilled. But if you want more than survival, if you want purpose, power, peace, you must rise above your default programming. You must become conscious. And that begins by choosing your mindset not once, not twice, but every single day. And not when it's easy. Anyone can be optimistic when the sun is shining. Anyone can be brave when the risk is low. The real test of your mindset is when the storm hits, when everything is uncertain, when failure breathes down your neck and the path forward disappears into fog. That's when you learn who you really are. That's when mindset is no longer theory, it becomes weaponry. Most people never upgrade their mind because they are addicted to the identity they've always known. They would rather stay stuck in the pain they recognize than step into the unknown potential they fear. But comfort is a slow death, and you must be willing to kill your old self 1,000 times in order to give birth to the next version of who you are becoming. That's what mindset is. It's the seed of transformation planted in the soil of discomfort. It's not just positive thinking, it's mental discipline. It's the choice to see adversity as fuel, not failure. It's the refusal to be a victim of your own narrative. If you truly want to control your mind, you have to stop chasing motivation and start building momentum. Motivation is emotional. It's fragile. It dies the second you face resistance. But momentum is earned. It comes from consistent action, not ideal conditions. When you act in alignment with your highest vision, even when you don't feel like it, you prove to yourself that you are bigger than your emotions. You show your brain who's in charge. This is what Henry Ford understood when he said, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right." He wasn't talking about delusion. He was talking about intention. Because belief shapes behavior, and behavior shapes outcome, and outcome reinforces belief. It's a feedback loop. If you believe you're capable, you try harder, you last longer, you seek solutions instead of excuses, and that changes your reality. Not because the universe is magical, but because your mindset filtered your choices in a way that created opportunity where others saw none. You must become a master of your internal dialogue. Every single day, there is a voice narrating your life, and most of us don't even question it. It says, "You always mess things up," or "You're not a leader," or "You're just not that kind of person." But who programmed that voice? Where did that script come from? And more importantly, why are you still letting it run? You have to challenge that voice. You have to interrogate it the way a truth seeker interrogates a lie. Because if you do not inspect your thoughts, they will inspect your future. And left unchallenged, they will become a prophecy. Your mindset is a weapon, but only when it is held with awareness, with precision, with conviction. It's not about pretending bad things don't happen. It's about meeting difficulty with a stronger internal frame. It's about walking through chaos without letting it colonize your spirit. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate. The ability to not only accept what happens, but to embrace it as part of your path. Not because it's pleasant, not because it's fair, but because it is yours to transform. That is the power of mindset. It makes you an alchemist. It allows you to take fear and transmute it into fire, to take failure and convert it into fuel, to take pain and forge it into perspective. The circumstances don't change, but you do. And that changes everything. When you understand this, the game shifts. Life is no longer happening to you. It's happening through you. And your role is not to control every outcome, but to control the mind that faces them. Because when you master your mindset, you stop needing permission. You stop negotiating with your potential. You stop waiting for signs and start becoming one. That is the beginning of mental sovereignty. That is the birth of power. Not the kind that shouts. Not the kind that needs applause. But the kind that stands unmoved when the whole world shakes. The kind that builds not because it is certain of success, but because it refuses to die without trying. This is mindset. And it is not optional. It is the foundation. It is the framework. It is the first brick in the empire of your life. Every vision, every purpose, every discipline you will ever build must begin here. If the mind is weak, the body follows. If the mind is clear, the path appears. Everything rises or falls by what you believe about yourself when no one is watching. Chapter 3. Belief is the seed of power. Everything you have ever done, everything you have ever built, destroyed, pursued, abandoned, loved, feared, or run from, began first in the mind as a belief. Belief is not an accessory to action. It is the source code that governs it. Before a hand moves, before a decision is made, before a voice speaks a dream aloud, belief is already working, silently and invisibly, writing the script of what is possible. If your beliefs are poisoned, so is your vision. If your beliefs are small, so is your ambition. And if your beliefs are borrowed from others, you will spend your life living someone else's idea of who you should be, while your real self dies a slow, quiet death inside a mind that never learned to rebel. To understand belief is to understand the mechanics of power. Power is not given. Power is not found. Power is believed into existence. And that belief does not require evidence. It creates it. Every great inventor, every revolutionary, every world shaker acted not because they were certain, but because they believed enough to risk being wrong. They believed so deeply in a possibility that did not yet exist, that they made the world bend toward their vision. Not because the world was ready, but because they were. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb on his first attempt. He failed over 1,000 times, and each time he did, the average mind would have used failure as proof of impossibility. But Edison wasn't operating with the belief system of the average man. He believed that failure was feedback. He believed that iteration was progress. He believed that if he kept going long enough, truth would yield. And it did, not because he was lucky, but because he was relentless in his belief. You see, belief is not about blind hope. It is not about delusion or naive optimism. Belief is a force. It is an internal engine that drives persistence, endurance, courage, and creativity when the external world gives you no validation, no confirmation, and no sign of success. When no one believes in you, belief is what keeps you building. It is what separates those who die with their dreams still inside them from those who drag their dreams into reality, kicking and screaming if necessary. But here is the truth most people will never tell you. Belief is a choice. It is not something you are born with. It is not a gift. It is a decision you make every single day to either align your mind with limitation or align your life with potential. And most people do not fail because they lack talent or opportunity. They fail because they refuse to believe they belong in the room where their future is waiting for them. They are convinced, by fear, by past failures, by the opinions of small-minded people, that they are not ready, not worthy, not enough. So they shrink. They procrastinate. They self-sabotage. Not because the dream isn't real, but because their belief is not. The most dangerous virus in the world is not external. It is the internal narrative that says, "People like me don't do things like that." That one sentence has killed more dreams than poverty, politics, or failure ever will. Because once you internalize the belief that you are not meant to rise, you will unconsciously engineer your entire life to stay down. You'll avoid risks that might reveal your greatness. You'll surround yourself with people who validate your limitations. You'll stay busy with distractions so you never have to confront the question, what could I become if I stopped doubting myself? And it's not that the voice in your head is telling you the truth, it's that it's telling you what you've repeated. That's how belief is formed. Repetition. Emotion. Identity. The brain learns by pattern, and the more often you tell yourself something, especially if it's laced with fear or pain, the deeper it becomes embedded in your neural wiring. So if you grew up hearing you were a failure, or stupid, or lazy, or not special, your subconscious mind begins to accept that as your baseline identity. And identity is powerful. Because once you believe something about who you are, you will find a way to act it out, consciously or not. That's why you cannot simply think your way into greatness. You have to build belief through action. You have to do the hard thing, the uncomfortable thing, the terrifying thing. Because every time you do something that contradicts your old identity, you weaken the lie and strengthen the truth. And that's what belief really is. It's not just what you say to yourself, it's what you prove to yourself. This is why discipline matters. This is why commitment matters. This is why showing up even when you don't feel ready is the single most powerful act of personal rebellion you can take. Because every time you do something hard on purpose, you are telling your brain, we are no longer living by fear. We are no longer letting doubt make our decisions. And eventually your brain gets the message. The identity begins to shift. The self-concept evolves. And you stop acting like someone who is trying, you start acting like someone who is becoming. Walt Disney was told he lacked imagination. Can you understand how absurd that is now? That one of the greatest visionaries in modern history was told by men in suits that his ideas were childish, foolish, and destined to fail. But Disney didn't need their belief. He had his own. He lived in a world that didn't exist yet, and because he believed in it long enough, hard enough, stubbornly enough, he built it anyway. That is the power of belief. It is the fire that burns through resistance and gives shape to what was once just an idea. And belief is not limited by where you come from. Abraham Lincoln was born in a one-room log cabin, grew up in poverty, lost multiple elections, faced tragedy after tragedy, and still led a fractured nation through its darkest chapter. Not because he was the smartest man in the room, but because he believed in something bigger than himself. He believed in unity, in justice, in endurance, and he proved that a single mind, aligned with purpose and conviction, can carry a generation forward. So I will ask you now, not in passing, but as a mirror held up to your soul, what do you believe about yourself that is keeping you small? What stories have you inherited that you are still living out as if they are law? Who told you that you couldn't? Who made you think you were ordinary? And why, after all this time, are you still letting them write your future? It ends now. You must take your beliefs to trial. You must cross-examine every assumption that has kept you in a box and expose it for the fiction it is. You must break the addiction to comfort and start feeding your mind with the kind of evidence that supports your highest identity, not the easiest one. Because if you do not choose your beliefs consciously, you will absorb them passively, and you will wake up one day realizing you built a life on ideas that never belonged to you in the first place. Belief is not a feeling. It is not a mood. It is a foundation. It is what allows you to walk into rooms you've never been in, speak dreams you've never seen, and take action toward goals that feel light years away, because something inside you whispers, it's possible and it's mine. That's where control begins. Not in thought. Not in planning. But in belief. Because belief decides what thoughts are allowed to stay. Belief decides what actions you will take. Belief is the root. Everything else is the fruit. Chapter 4. Clarity is a weapon. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must stop moving and ask themselves, not where am I going, but why am I going at all? Because motion without meaning is noise. And in the modern world, noise is everywhere. Distraction is the new addiction. Busyness is worn like a badge of honor. But underneath the chaos, most people are not progressing, they're escaping. They fill their calendars to avoid confronting the fact that they no longer know what they're building. They wake up every day and go through routines they didn't design, chasing goals they never questioned, hoping that success will somehow save them from the confusion they've been too afraid to face. But there is no salvation in speed. Direction is everything. And without clarity, ambition is just another form of self-destruction. Clarity is not something you stumble into, it is something you fight for. It is the result of intentional silence, ruthless self-inquiry, and the willingness to dig beneath your surface motivations until you find something solid, something unmoving when everything else shakes. Clarity is a weapon because it cuts through the fog that keeps most people trapped in cycles of procrastination, indecision, and internal conflict. It slices through the noise of other people's opinions, the weight of expectation, the constant pressure to fit into roles you never chose. It is the sword you carry into every battle where distraction threatens to devour your destiny. And yet, most people are terrified of clarity. Not because they don't want it, but because they suspect that once they find it, they will have no more excuses left to hide behind. They will have to act. They will have to stop blaming the past, stop pointing fingers, stop pretending they don't know what needs to be done. Clarity demands responsibility. It demands commitment. It eliminates the seductive comfort of confusion and forces you to choose a side: build or decay, grow or stagnate, become or wither. This is why so few people ever sit still long enough to truly hear their own thoughts. Silence is a mirror, and for many, the reflection is unbearable. They fear what they'll discover in the absence of distraction. But this silence, this deep inner stillness, is where clarity lives. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase you. It waits. Patiently. Quietly. Until you are done running, done numbing, done blaming. And only when you are ready to look into yourself without flinching will it begin to speak. Clarity is not about certainty. It is about alignment. You may not know every step, but you know the direction. You know what feels like truth in your bones and what smells like compromise. You know when you're betraying your potential. And you know when you're walking the path that, even if it's brutal, belongs to you. The world will always offer you easier roads, more acceptable dreams, safer identities. But if you are clear on who you are and what you're here to do, you will not be seduced by comfort. You will choose the mountain because it is yours. Look back through history. Look at every figure who ever changed the game, not just for themselves, but for the world. They were not always the most talented, the most connected, or even the most prepared. But they were clear. Clear on what they believed. Clear on what they wanted to create. Clear on what they would not compromise, no matter the cost. Martin Luther King Jr. was not a perfect man, but he was a man of terrifying clarity. He knew the vision, he knew the cost, and he walked toward both with eyes open. That is the power of clarity. It makes cowards brave, and it makes sacrifice bearable. Clarity also protects your energy. When you know your mission, you stop bleeding time into things that don't move you forward. You stop negotiating with people who don't share your values. You stop chasing temporary pleasures that drain your long-term fire. You stop needing validation from those who will never understand your vision, because you're not building for applause, you're building from purpose. And purpose doesn't beg to be liked. Without clarity, the mind becomes a battlefield of conflicting desires. You say you want freedom, but you chase comfort. You say you want success, but you live like survival is your only goal. You say you want truth, but you keep hiding behind stories that were written to keep you small. This internal contradiction is the root of burnout. Not working too hard, but working without meaning. Running without knowing why. Chasing without knowing what. When the soul doesn't believe in the mission, the body breaks down under the weight of pretending. This is why vision boards don't work without discipline. Why motivation fades if it's not anchored in values. Why strategy is irrelevant if it's not guided by a principle that makes you feel alive. Clarity is the lens that turns energy into force, turns ideas into systems, turns dreams into blueprints. It's not just about knowing what you want, it's about knowing what you refuse to settle for. It's about drawing lines in your life that are not crossed. Because without boundaries, your future gets negotiated away one compromise at a time. Clarity is not passive. It's not something you sit and wait for. It is a discipline. It is forged in the early morning hours when the world is asleep and you are staring into the eyes of your own ambition, asking it hard questions. It is strengthened when you walk away from what is easy in order to honor what is true. It grows every time you say no to distractions that offer dopamine but steal destiny. And the more you protect it, the sharper it becomes. The more dangerous you become. Because clarity brings intensity. When you know what matters, you become intolerant of waste. You stop entertaining gossip, drama, low-level arguments, pointless consumption, and the exhausting cycle of comparison. You begin to build. Not for the image, not for applause, but for legacy. You are no longer pulled in 100 directions by trends or fads or fear. You are centered, grounded, dangerous in the best possible way. You become the kind of person who does not need to announce themselves, because the focus in your eyes speaks louder than any words ever could. The reason most people never access their true potential is because they scatter their power into too many places. One dream here, one goal there, a dozen unfinished projects, each one draining their sense of momentum and self-trust. But when clarity enters, you collapse the chaos. You stop trying to be everything and instead become excellent at something. You stop reaching for 50 things and commit your full intensity to the few things that actually matter. That shift, from scattered to surgical, is the birth of mastery. You want to control your mind? Get clear. You want to command your focus? Get clear. You want to stop falling for every distraction, every mood, every self-doubt that floats through your consciousness like a cloud? Then anchor yourself in clarity so deep that even when the storm hits, you do not move. Because clarity is not the absence of challenge, it is the presence of conviction. It is what allows you to stand when everything else falls. And if you don't have it yet, it's not because it doesn't exist, it's because you haven't gone deep enough. Stop looking for clarity in external noise. You will not find it on a screen. You will not find it in the opinions of strangers or in the endless scroll of comparison. You will find it in the quiet. Chapter 5. Purpose is the fire you feed. There comes a time when discipline alone isn't enough, when no structure, no routine, no accountability system can keep you going, because every part of you is exhausted, every door feels shut, every effort appears futile. In that moment, something deeper must ignite inside you. Something stronger than logic, more enduring than excitement, more resilient than motivation. That something is purpose. Purpose is not a luxury. It's not a bonus feature for the privileged few. It is the core fuel of human perseverance. Without it, you will collapse the moment the path becomes steep. Without it, you will question every sacrifice, negotiate every standard, and doubt every decision. But with it, when you truly possess a reason for your existence that transcends your own comfort, there is no obstacle that can hold you. You will bleed and crawl and sacrifice and rise because something within you has declared, "This is why I am here." Purpose is not about passion. Passion fades. Passion is emotional and unstable, rising and falling with circumstance. Purpose is different. Purpose is stable. It is rooted. It is the deep, immovable why that anchors you when everything external falls apart. It is what wakes you up at 4 a.m. not because you have to, but because you must. It is what drives you to say no to the easy path, not out of obligation, but because you're unwilling to betray the mission. And the mission, your mission, is the one thing in your life that must be bigger than you. Because if your purpose ends with you, then it's not purpose. It's preference. Real purpose elevates you out of your own ego. It pulls you toward service, toward contribution, toward a vision that outlives your name. You see, most people are not suffering from lack of talent. They're suffering from lack of direction. They are drifting through life, chasing the next dopamine hit, the next shiny distraction, the next short-lived win, because they have not anchored themselves in a reason for being. And when you don't know why you're here, the pain feels heavier, the failures feel fatal, and the grind feels meaningless. That's when people quit. That's when people numb. That's when people decide that average is good enough, not because it satisfies their soul, but because they never built a reason strong enough to suffer for more. You were not designed for numbness. You were not meant to drift. The very structure of your brain was built for growth, for challenge, for the relentless pursuit of progress. But it only comes alive when you give it something worthy to pursue. Purpose isn't about comfort, it's about calling. It's about aligning your life to a direction so powerful that sacrifice becomes sacred. You stop complaining about the work, because the work is the proof that you're living for something real. You stop resenting the pain, because the pain is part of the price you're proud to pay. This is what high performers understand that the masses never will. Pain with purpose transforms you. Pain without purpose destroys you. Look at history. Look at every person who has reshaped the fabric of their time. They were not driven by popularity, applause, or convenience. They were driven by conviction, by necessity, by an inner truth they could not silence. Think of Harriet Tubman, leading hundreds of enslaved souls to freedom with a bounty on her head and death waiting at every turn. She wasn't doing it for reward. She was doing it because her soul had decided that freedom was not negotiable. That kind of fire cannot be faked. That kind of resolve is what makes human beings unstoppable. That kind of purpose burns through fear. And here is the part no one wants to hear. You don't find purpose by thinking about it. You don't sit around and wait for a bolt of lightning. Purpose isn't a magical revelation. It's a decision. It's built through action. Through paying attention to what breaks your heart and what lights you up. Through trying and failing and learning and digging and daring to care deeply about something in a world that numbs everything down. Purpose is not found in clarity alone. It is found in commitment. It is uncovered when you stop trying to avoid pain and instead start moving toward what gives pain meaning. When you live without purpose, your mind turns against you. The mind was never meant to wander without aim. Without a target, it attacks itself. It looks for danger. It breeds anxiety. It becomes consumed with what-ifs and worst-case scenarios and shallow distractions. But when your life is aligned to a mission that truly matters to you, your mind shifts. It organizes itself around that aim. It begins filtering decisions differently. It stops asking, "What do I feel like doing?" and starts asking, "What moves me closer to the mission?" That one mental shift changes everything. Purpose also protects you from comparison. It frees you from the mental prison of measuring your life against everyone else's highlight reel. When you are connected to a mission, you stop caring about what they have or what they're doing, because you are consumed with building what you were meant to build. Your focus deepens. Your confidence becomes rooted in process, not outcome. And slowly, you realize that success is not measured in likes or followers or income. It's measured in alignment. Alignment with who you are, what you value, and what you are building with your one, irreplaceable life. And yes, there will be seasons where you doubt your purpose. Moments where the path disappears and the pressure mounts and you wonder if it's all worth it. But in those moments, remember this. You do not need constant certainty to stay committed. You need trust. You need to trust that your soul didn't lie to you when it told you to begin. You need to trust that the same fire that called you is the same fire that will sustain you. And if that flame ever dims, feed it. Feed it with discipline, with courage, with integrity, with the reminder that this is bigger than you, and that's exactly why it matters. Because purpose gives pain a reason. It gives delay a context. It gives discipline a direction. And once you lock into it, once you align your actions, your habits, your relationships, and your thoughts around that singular aim, you will become the kind of person who cannot be bought, cannot be broken, and cannot be stopped. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. And purpose is what makes you that strong. So stop waiting for the right time. Stop waiting for everything to make sense. The fog will not lift before you begin. The fear will not vanish before you commit. You will only see the path as you walk it. Purpose is not handed to you. It is built by you. In your decisions. In your priorities. In your refusal to live one more day disconnected from the reason you're still breathing. Control of the mind begins with control of your aim. Aim requires purpose. And purpose, real purpose, is the fire you must feed. Chapter 6. Discipline is the bridge between vision and victory. There is a moment after the dream is born but before it becomes real where most people fail. Not because the dream is wrong, not because they are incapable, and not even because the world is against them, but because they never built the bridge. That bridge is discipline. Discipline is not about perfection, and it's not about punishment. It is the brutal, consistent commitment to the work required to close the gap between the vision you see in your mind and the reality you live in. Every visionary needs it. Every builder needs it. Every leader who ever left a mark on the world bled for it. Because discipline is what turns direction into destination. It is the difference between a fantasy and a future. You cannot control your life if you cannot control yourself. And you cannot control yourself if you cannot command your own attention, your own impulses, your own choices in the face of discomfort. That's what discipline really is. It is self-respect in action. It is the recognition that the emotions you feel in the moment do not outrank the values you've chosen to live by. It is the realization that success is not about getting everything right. It's about becoming someone who keeps showing up, no matter what mood, what weather, what obstacle tries to interfere. Most people love the idea of greatness, but they resent the price it demands. They romanticize the outcome, but they despise the repetition. They want transformation, but they refuse the process. They want to feel motivated every day, and when they don't, they think something is wrong. But nothing is wrong. Motivation is fleeting. It was never built to sustain you. The mind that requires motivation to act is the same mind that will abandon the path the second the road gets steep. Discipline is not emotional, it is structural. It is internal architecture. It is the scaffolding that holds you up when everything else falls apart. Look at every single person who has ever made the impossible possible, and what you will find beneath the talent, beneath the innovation, beneath the charisma, every single time, is discipline. Nikola Tesla, working in obsessive solitude, building systems so far ahead of his time that most couldn't even comprehend them. Not because he was chasing applause, but because he was a slave to the work. Kobe Bryant, shooting free throws at 4 a.m., long after he had already reached the top of the game, because excellence wasn't a goal to him, it was the minimum requirement. These were not just people with big dreams. They were people with big standards. They didn't just want it, they structured their entire lives around it. That's what separates the few from the many. Everyone says they want results, but only a few are willing to design a life that produces those results. And that design is discipline. It's what you do when you don't feel like doing it. It's the way you respond when the voice in your head tries to convince you to delay, to wait, to indulge just this once. Discipline is not about grinding yourself into the ground with mindless hustle. It's about alignment. It's about living in a way that proves, day after day, that you are loyal to your future, not a slave to your impulses. The truth is, most people never get what they want because they're still negotiating with what it costs. They still think there's a shortcut. They think there's a version of the journey where they get to keep their old habits, their old routines, their old excuses, and somehow wake up in a new reality. But life does not reward intention. It rewards execution. Discipline is the mechanism that converts your intention into reality. Without it, nothing you believe, nothing you hope for, nothing you dream of ever crosses the threshold from mental to material. And don't misunderstand, discipline is not natural for most. It's not something you're born with. It's something you build. It's a muscle. It is trained in the moments when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when no one is asking you to rise, but you do anyway. Because you have made a decision that who you are becoming is more important than how you feel in any given moment. Because you've decided to stop breaking promises to yourself. And that decision, repeated over time, is how you develop the rarest kind of self-confidence. The kind built not on words or theory, but on evidence. Discipline is the proof. When you look back over your week, your month, your year, you want to see proof that you honored what you said mattered. Not just when it was convenient. Not just when things were exciting. But when it was inconvenient, when it was boring, when it was hard. That's when discipline counts the most, because that's when most people quit. Most people are disciplined until discomfort arrives. But those who control their minds, the ones who rise above the average, the ordinary, the mediocre, they are disciplined especially when discomfort arrives. Because they know that pressure is not the signal to stop. It's the sign they're getting closer. This is why the mind must be trained daily, not just to think clearly, but to act decisively. Discipline is not just a matter of doing the work. It's the process of making your future identity more real than your current limitations. It is the act of refusing to be pulled off course by mood swings, temptation, or fatigue. And yes, you will be tired. Yes, you will be tempted. But no, you don't owe every feeling your obedience. Some days you will not feel like showing up. Show up anyway. Some days the results will be invisible. Show up anyway. Some days your mind will tell you the effort doesn't matter. Show up anyway. Because every time you do, you cast a vote for the person you are becoming, and those votes are not wasted. If you study the world's greatest achievements, landing on the moon, building the pyramids, creating the internet, they are all testaments to consistent, disciplined human effort. They are not miracles. They are monuments to focus and patience and resolve. They are reminders that almost anything is possible for those willing to suffer long enough in the direction of their vision. And your mind, your greatest ally or your greatest enemy, needs to know that you're not just interested in your future. You're committed to it. Discipline is how you prove it. So design your days like your future depends on them, because it does. Guard your attention like it's sacred, because it is. Choose your inputs, your habits, your routines like you're building an empire from the inside out, because that's exactly what you're doing. Discipline is not glamorous. It is not sexy, but it is divine. It is the mechanism by which vision becomes flesh. And no matter how powerful your dreams are, if you do not back them with discipline, they will rot in your mind until they become regret. You want control? You want freedom? You want the peace that comes from knowing you're not a prisoner of your own mind? Then build discipline like your life depends on it. Because it does. Chapter 7. Action is the cure for fear. Fear is not your enemy. It's a compass. It's an alarm system, not a verdict. It signals the edge of comfort, the edge of safety, the edge of the known, and that's exactly why most people stop there. They believe the feeling of fear means turn back. But what they don't realize is that fear has no power unless you obey it. Fear is a liar, but it's a persuasive one, and if you don't learn how to respond to it, it will quietly govern your entire life while you convince yourself you're being realistic. You don't need to kill fear to move forward, you need to learn how to act through it. Because fear never leaves. But neither does your potential. The question is, which one do you serve? The mind is designed for survival. It is built to detect threats, to avoid pain, to keep you safe. And while that programming may have served your ancestors in the wild, it works against you in the modern world where the threats are no longer predators or famine, but internal rejection, judgment, failure, embarrassment. Your brain treats a difficult conversation or a risky idea as if it's a saber-toothed tiger. It floods you with cortisol. It screams for retreat. But if you want to do anything worthwhile, lead, build, create, grow, you must stop asking your fear for permission. Because the life you want will always live on the other side of your comfort zone, and the only bridge to reach it is action. You cannot think your way out of fear. You cannot journal it away, analyze it away, meditate it away in every situation. Those tools have value, but action is what rewires the brain. Action is the medicine. It's the experience of doing the thing that disarms the fear surrounding it. Every time you take action in the presence of fear, your brain records it. It learns that the story it told you, the story that said you couldn't handle it, that it would break you, that you would be humiliated, was false. And over time, those experiences start to shape new beliefs. Not because you read them in a book, but because you lived them in your body. Fear is a signal, but action is your response. And you don't need to eliminate the emotion to take that step, you need to redefine the meaning of it. Most people believe fear means stop, but high performers, warriors, creators, those who've controlled their minds at the highest level, they understand that fear is a green light. It means pay attention, not retreat. It means something important is at stake. It means you're facing a threshold. And thresholds are never comfortable. But they are the birthplace of your next evolution. There is a principle in neuroscience called the confidence-competence loop. The idea is simple but powerful. The more you act, the more competent you become. The more competent you become, the more confident you feel. And the more confident you feel, the more likely you are to act again. That's how courage is built, not in theory, but in motion. The mind gains confidence not by waiting until you feel ready, but by seeing itself take action even when it feels unprepared. That is what breaks the cycle of self-doubt. That is what begins to rewire your self-concept. Because courage is not the absence of fear, it is the refusal to let fear dictate your direction. Let's be very clear. You will never feel ready for the most important decisions of your life. Not when you start the business. Not when you walk away from comfort. Not when you speak the truth that may cost you approval. Not when you leap into the unknown. Fear will always be there. But readiness is not a prerequisite for action. Action is what creates readiness. Action builds the muscles of resilience, adaptability, and clarity. It is movement that creates feedback. It is momentum that reveals direction. And most importantly, it is doing that separates the dreamers from the builders. You can spend your whole life studying the path and still go nowhere. Because no amount of theory can replace the experience of doing. The mind is addicted to preparation because preparation feels like progress without risk. But progress without risk is an illusion. You will never become who you're meant to be without confronting fear, And you will never defeat fear by thinking alone. You must step into the unknown. You must learn to breathe under pressure. You must act not because it feels safe, but because it's aligned. Think of the greatest breakthroughs in history, not one of them happened without fear. Every inventor, every rebel, every leader, every artist who changed the course of human thought had to walk directly into fear and act anyway. Rosa Parks didn't wait for courage to arrive before refusing her seat. She acted. Neil Armstrong didn't land on the moon because it was comfortable. He acted. Steve Jobs didn't build Apple because he had guarantees. He acted. And in every one of these moments, the fear didn't disappear first, it was carried alongside the mission. You must stop waiting to feel fearless and instead become someone who can function while being afraid. You must train your nervous system to remain calm in the presence of uncertainty. You must learn to identify fear not as a stop sign, but as a signal that you are exactly where growth happens. And you must act. Not later. Because every second you hesitate, fear gains ground. Every time you wait for a better moment, fear plants deeper roots. The longer you delay, the more powerful the illusion becomes. Fear thrives in imagination. But action lives in reality. And reality has a way of breaking fear's illusion if you're willing to meet it. That difficult conversation you've been avoiding? It's not as destructive as the mental prison of avoidance. That opportunity you've been hesitating to pursue? It won't wait forever. That habit you've been afraid to start because you might fail? The real failure is never starting. What you do not confront will control you. What you delay will define you. So act now. Not recklessly. Not impulsively. But decisively. Make movement a habit. Build momentum on purpose. Stop seeking the perfect plan. Start with the next step. That's all the mind needs to regain control. Evidence that it is not helpless. That it can direct the body. That it is in command. Because control of the mind is not given to the thinker. It is earned by the doer. So when fear speaks, let it speak. But do not obey. Do not argue. Do not justify. Simply move. Because every act of movement is an act of defiance against limitation. Every step taken in the presence of fear builds the foundation of a stronger, more dangerous version of you. And that version, the one who acts with intention, who confronts discomfort, who leads even when afraid, that version is the one who controls the mind. Chapter 8. Gratitude is the anchor of power. There is a quiet strength that most people overlook. It doesn't scream. It doesn't flash. It doesn't make headlines. But it holds power unlike anything else. That strength is gratitude. And no, not the watered-down version the world sells you. The kind where you list a few nice things and move on with your day. I'm talking about a deeper kind of gratitude. A radical kind. The kind that doesn't depend on things going your way. The kind that roots you when the world is spinning. The kind that reminds your mind every single day that no matter what chaos is unfolding around you, you are not a victim. You are not powerless. You still have control over how you perceive, how you respond, how you create meaning out of the fire you're walking through. Gratitude, in its truest form, is not passive. It is not soft. It is a psychological weapon. It is one of the few forces powerful enough to break the grip of fear, to interrupt anxiety, to neutralize the subtle poison of entitlement that creeps in when things don't go your way. You cannot be anxious and grateful at the same time. The brain doesn't have the bandwidth for both. And that's why gratitude, when practiced as a discipline, not a mood, becomes a state of power. It interrupts the emotional storms that would otherwise hijack your thoughts. It brings you back to the present when your mind tries to escape into imaginary disasters. It centers you in what is, instead of getting lost in what isn't. People think gratitude is what you feel when life is good. That's wrong. Gratitude is what makes life feel good, no matter how hard it is. It's the decision to find the meaning inside the struggle. It's what allows you to extract fuel from the very things that were supposed to break you. And that's why the strongest people you will ever meet are not the ones who have avoided pain. They are the ones who turned pain into perspective. They are the ones who didn't wait for perfect conditions to appreciate what they had. They practiced gratitude in the middle of loss. In the middle of rejection. In the middle of not knowing how the story would end. Because gratitude is not about ignoring the darkness. It's about refusing to let the darkness blind you to the light that still exists. It doesn't mean you pretend things are okay when they're not. It means you reclaim your mental footing so that pain doesn't turn into bitterness, and uncertainty doesn't turn into paralysis. It means that even in your lowest seasons, you stay awake to the truth that there is still something here for you. A lesson, a strength, a moment, a breath. You don't need to feel good to be grateful. You need to choose it, over and over, especially when it's hardest. You want to control your mind? Then start by controlling your perspective. Because the way you see determines the way you feel. And the way you feel shapes the way you act. Gratitude reshapes your lens. It forces your mind to reframe the story it's telling. It says, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe this is the beginning. Maybe this pain is not the punishment, it's the preparation. Maybe this delay is not denial, it's divine timing. Gratitude is the voice that challenges the worst-case narrative playing in your head and asks, what else could this mean? And no, this isn't about toxic positivity. It's not about pretending everything is amazing when it's clearly not. It's about mastery. Gratitude is the sign of a mind that has trained itself to stay functional in emotional chaos. A mind that refuses to collapse into helplessness. A mind that has learned to find clarity in pain, not just comfort in pleasure. Because gratitude isn't only for the sunny days. It's for the days when the storm won't break, when the plan falls apart, when nothing is going your way and your mind wants to give up. That's when gratitude becomes most powerful. Because it roots you in the truth that you've already come through worse. That you still have tools. That you still have time. That you are still here. You think gratitude is soft? Tell that to the man who loses everything and still rises. Tell that to the mother holding her dying child and still finding the strength to pray. Tell that to the soldier who stares down death and still thanks God for one more sunrise. Gratitude is not weakness. It's how you protect your peace in a world built to erode it. It's how you remain whole when the external world fractures. It's how you take back your power in situations where you technically have no control. Gratitude also protects you from the greatest mental trap of all, entitlement. Entitlement tells you that you deserve more. That you've been cheated. That life owes you something. And once that belief takes root, everything feels unfair. Every obstacle becomes personal. Every inconvenience becomes a wound. Every delay becomes evidence that you've been forgotten. But gratitude destroys entitlement at the root. It reminds you that nothing is promised. That everything you have, your breath, your mind, your choices, your chances, is a gift. And gifts are not owed. They are stewarded. Once you understand that, you stop living like a victim of life and start living like a student of it. You start noticing things again. You start seeing what's still good, even when everything hurts. You begin to reclaim your mental focus from the constant stream of what's missing. And when you train your mind to appreciate what's present, you unlock new energy, new patience, new strength. Because where your attention goes, your emotional state follows. And if your attention is always focused on what's broken, what's lacking, what's unfair, then your emotional life becomes a mirror of suffering. But when your attention is disciplined, anchored to what is strong, beautiful, resilient, and available, no matter how small, then even the hardest seasons cannot shatter your center. This is not theory. This is practice. Daily. Not just when you feel like it, but especially when you don't. You wake up and you choose to notice. You choose to find something worth appreciating, even if it's just the fact that you have one more shot. One more day. One more chance to respond differently, to breathe deeper, to move with just a little more awareness than you did yesterday. Gratitude is not the absence of ambition. It is the fuel of sustainable ambition. Because a grateful mind is a clear mind. And clarity is power. When you live without gratitude, your mind becomes a battleground of unmet expectations. But when you anchor yourself in it, no matter how uncertain the world becomes, you hold something unshakable. You hold a reason to continue. You hold the clarity to choose. And that, more than anything else, is what keeps a human being free, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of perspective. Gratitude does not mean you stop wanting more. It means you stop being blind to what you already have. And from that place, from that deep, centered state of internal wealth, you build with power, not desperation. You create with joy, not scarcity. You lead from overflow, not emptiness. Because the mind that knows how to give thanks in the dark is the mind that will rise into the light with twice the strength. Chapter 9. Adaptability is survival for the modern mind. In a world that changes faster than your plans can keep up with, the ability to adapt is not just an advantage, it is a survival requirement. The environment we live in today does not reward the most talented, the most educated, or even the most passionate. It rewards the most adaptable. Those who can shift without losing themselves. Those who can bend without breaking. Those who understand that control is never about controlling the world. It's about controlling your response to it. Because if your mind is only stable when things go your way, it is not stable. It is conditional. And anything that is conditional will eventually collapse under pressure. Adaptability is not about becoming passive. It's not about surrendering to chaos. It's about learning to move with life instead of against it. It's about understanding that resistance is wasted energy when applied in the wrong direction. When you fight change, you don't stop it. You only exhaust yourself trying to hold on to what no longer exists. But when you train your mind to see change not as a threat, but as an opportunity to evolve, then everything becomes fuel. Even failure. Especially failure. Most people cling to routines, beliefs, and identities not because they serve them, but because they're familiar. The familiar becomes safe, even if it's killing you slowly. You stay in the relationship. You stay in the job. You keep living by the same rules, the same patterns, the same mindset that hasn't brought you closer to the life you actually want. Because to let go of that identity, to step into the unknown, to adapt, feels like death. But what you don't realize is that clinging to the old is a kind of death. It's the slow death of potential. The erosion of energy. The silent rot of growth never pursued. The most powerful minds are not the ones that never doubt. They are the ones that evolve. The ones that learn. The ones that rewrite their operating system every time new information, new experiences, or new obstacles demand it. This is why fixed mindset is poison. Because a fixed mind says, "This is who I am," even when the world is showing you who you need to become. A fixed mind seeks comfort in stability, even when that stability is stagnation. But an adaptive mind asks the harder question, what is now required of me? Not what do I want? Not what feels good. But what version of me does this moment demand? That question, when asked consistently, becomes a superpower. Because it forces you to evolve intentionally. It forces you to keep learning when most people settle. It forces you to stay fluid in the face of pressure, to respond rather than react, to shift gears without losing momentum. This is not flexibility for the sake of softness. It's resilience disguised as fluidity. It is the discipline to say, I will not let this challenge define me, but I will let it refine me. Adaptability also requires humility. And that's why so many people resist it. Because to adapt, you must first admit that what you've been doing may no longer work. You must admit that your current strategy, your current way of thinking, your current definition of success might not be sufficient for the next level. That's hard. That's vulnerable. But it's necessary. Because evolution is always preceded by ego death. You cannot hold on to the old story and write a new one at the same time. Something must be released. And the stronger your grip on who you used to be, the longer you delay becoming who you were meant to be. It's not about changing who you are at your core. It's about changing the expression of who you are as the context shifts. You don't abandon your values, you adjust your strategies. You don't betray your purpose, you evolve your approach. This is what allows you to remain true to yourself without becoming rigid. Because rigidity in a changing world is suicide for your potential. You will be crushed by progress if you cannot move with it. Look at nature. The trees that survive hurricanes are not the stiffest. They are the most flexible. They bend. They yield. They sway. And then when the storm passes, they are still standing. That is what your mind must learn to do. It must learn how to absorb pressure without snapping. How to face disruption without descending into panic. How to change plans without abandoning the mission. This isn't weakness. This is elite mental strength. Adaptability is also the key to creativity. Because the greatest breakthroughs are never linear. They are discovered by minds willing to try, to test, to fail, to pivot, to question, to start again. Every great innovator in history adapted in real time. They didn't wait for the perfect formula. They responded to feedback. They embraced chaos as a source of data. They saw problems not as barriers, but as teachers. And they never let pride stop them from updating their approach. You cannot control the economy. You cannot control other people. You cannot control politics or pandemics or pain that shows up uninvited. But you can control how you respond. And in that response is your greatest power. Because when the rest of the world freezes in fear, an adaptive mind stays in motion. It keeps asking, what is now possible, instead of crying about what used to be. It moves forward, not recklessly, but creatively. And it does not need guarantees. It just needs a reason. And here's what's even more powerful. Adaptability increases confidence. Because when you stop needing everything to go your way, you stop fearing change. You no longer rely on predictability to feel powerful. You become the source of your own stability. You begin to trust not in the external circumstances, but in your own capacity to respond to whatever comes. And that trust, that grounded confidence, is what makes you mentally bulletproof. Not because nothing can shake you, but because nothing can break you. So train yourself to adapt. Not just when it's easy. Not just when you feel like it. But as a way of thinking. As a default operating system. Expect plans to fall apart, and be ready to rebuild. Expect things to go differently than you hoped, and stay sharp anyway. Expect to get knocked down, and rise smarter every single time. Because adaptability isn't just about survival. It's about acceleration. It's about staying agile enough to seize opportunity where others only see setback. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need ideal conditions to make progress, just enough awareness to adjust and enough courage to act. Adaptability is not weakness. It is not compromise. It is the evolved expression of strength. It is the refusal to be defined by circumstance. It is the commitment to becoming useful, effective, and relevant no matter what changes. And in a world that will never stop shifting, the ones who win are not those who grip the past with white-knuckled fear. The ones who win are those who keep moving, keep learning, keep evolving, no matter what the world throws at them. Control your mind. Adapt to the moment. Build forward. Chapter 10. Resilience is built in the fire, not the calm. There's a version of you that only hardship can introduce. A strength, a stillness, a clarity that does not appear in moments of peace. It is forged in pressure, in pain, in trial. Resilience is not something you discover when things are easy. It's what emerges when you have every reason to break, to quit, to collapse, and you decide to keep going anyway. That's the defining moment of mental mastery. Not when you feel strong, but when you act strong despite how you feel. Because resilience isn't about how many times you fall, it's about the way you rise. The speed, the attitude, the inner conversation you choose the moment after everything falls apart. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid the fire, trying to engineer a path with no pain, no friction, no failure. But what they don't understand is that the very thing they are avoiding is the thing that would turn them into who they're meant to be. You don't build resilience by reading about it. You build it by living through something that should have broken you, and choosing, somehow, to come back sharper. It's not about whether life knocks you down. That part is guaranteed. The test is how you respond when it does. When your plans collapse. When your identity cracks. When the world reminds you that nothing is promised and no one is coming to rescue you. That's when resilience is either revealed or found. You want to know if you've truly taken control of your mind? Don't look at how you behave when everything is going your way. Look at how you think, speak, and move when nothing is. When the outcome is uncertain, when the ground shakes, when fear creeps in and doubt is louder than belief, how do you respond then? Because that is when character is tested. That is when self-control becomes real. That is when the habits you've built either hold or collapse. And resilience doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It doesn't mean suppressing pain or faking strength. It means feeling everything, the frustration, the grief, the confusion, but refusing to let any of it steal your will to move forward. It means honoring your emotions without being ruled by them. It means giving yourself the grace to hurt and the grit to heal. It's what allows you to get back up not just once, but every single time you're knocked down. With more clarity, with more focus, with more power. There's a dangerous lie in our culture that says high achievers are made by success. They're not. They're made in the dark. They're made in the silence of failure, in the ache of uncertainty, in the private battles no one applauds you for winning. You think Lincoln became Lincoln because everything went well? He was born into poverty, lost the woman he loved, buried children, faced national hatred, and carried the weight of a divided nation on his back. He didn't lead because he had confidence. He led because he had resilience. He carried on because something inside him was more committed than the pain trying to stop him. And that's the common thread in every resilient life. Commitment. Not to comfort, not to ease, but to the mission. Resilience is only possible when the why is deeper than the obstacle. When the purpose is more important than the wound. When you've made a decision, not a temporary emotion, not a fleeting promise, but a deep, internal decision that you will not stop, no matter how long it takes, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how little applause you receive. Because you will be underestimated. You will be overlooked. You will face seasons where nothing makes sense, where no result shows up, where the effort seems invisible. That is the furnace. That is the fire. And you either become bitter, or you become bulletproof. You either surrender, or you get sharper. You either believe the story that you are done, or you write a new one right through the pain. And here's what most people never understand. Resilience is not born from being fearless. It is born from facing fear head-on and acting anyway. It's doing the thing that terrifies you. It's risking the loss, knowing it might come. It's getting up after the hit and choosing not to shrink. Resilience isn't glamorous. It's not a motivational quote or a highlight reel. It's late nights, broken plans, unanswered calls, shattered expectations, and still choosing to show up. To stay in it. To fight. And there will be moments where you question everything. Moments when the weight feels too heavy, when the goal feels too far, when your mind screams that this isn't worth it anymore. In those moments, you must pause. You must breathe. You must remember why you started and, more importantly, who you are becoming in the process. Resilience is not about reaching the goal perfectly. It's about becoming unshakable in the pursuit of it. And every time you choose to keep going, every time you silence the panic and take another step, you build something permanent. You wire your brain for strength. You create a new standard. You become the kind of person who does not fold under pressure, who does not shatter under rejection, who does not vanish when it gets dark. You become the storm. The world won't hand you resilience. It won't reward you for surviving. But your mind will remember. It will track every decision. And over time, it will transform your identity. You'll stop seeing yourself as someone trying, and start seeing yourself as someone capable. Because real resilience isn't about bouncing back. It's about rising changed. It's about rising wiser. It's about rising with scars, but also with strength no comfort zone could ever give you. So embrace the fire. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because nothing truly powerful is born in the absence of struggle. And because control of the mind does not happen in peace. It is earned in battle. You will either allow the fire to consume you, or you will let it forge you. Let it forge you. Chapter 11. Learning is the path to mental immortality. There is no such thing as a truly powerful mind that has stopped learning. The moment you believe you've arrived is the moment you begin to decay. The mind, like a blade, grows dull in stagnation. And yet, in a world obsessed with comfort and validation, continuous learning has become rare, not because people lack access to information, but because they've lost the humility to admit what they don't know. We live in an era where knowledge is everywhere, but wisdom is scarce, not because it's hidden, but because it requires effort, vulnerability, and the courage to let go of certainty. And if there is one truth you must internalize in your pursuit of mental control, it's this: The most dangerous person in the room is the one who has stopped learning. Learning is not an academic pursuit. It's not confined to books or classrooms or credentials. Learning is the discipline of mental evolution. It is the refusal to stay the same. It is the conscious act of exposing your assumptions to friction, of willingly stepping into environments that challenge your understanding, of stretching your cognitive limits until they become wider, sharper, more capable. It is not reserved for a particular phase of life. It is a lifestyle. And if you are not learning every day, deliberately, aggressively, then you are unconsciously programming yourself to fall behind. Because the mind, left unattended, defaults to autopilot. And autopilot does not lead to growth. It leads to habit. It leads to mental laziness disguised as efficiency. It leads to the repetition of yesterday's thoughts, yesterday's beliefs, yesterday's limitations, on a loop that slowly robs you of your potential while making you believe you're staying safe. But safety is not the goal. Mastery is. And mastery is reserved for those who are willing to become students forever. No matter how far they've come, no matter how much they've accomplished, no matter how often the world applauds them. Look at the minds that moved civilization forward. Da Vinci, Einstein, Franklin, Curie, Hawking. They did not learn because they had to. They learned because they were addicted to expansion. They understood that the brain is a frontier, not a container. And the more you explore it, the more of the world you can shape. They were not defined by what they knew. They were driven by what they didn't. That's the paradox of brilliance. The wiser you become, the more aware you are of your ignorance. The more you've mastered, the more curious you become. Because true intelligence is not loud. It's humble. It listens. It absorbs. It transforms. And that transformation only happens through friction. Learning is not always pleasant. In fact, real learning, the kind that rewires you, can feel violent. It can threaten your identity. It can expose the gaps in your character, in your thinking, in your discipline. That's why most people avoid it. They don't want to confront how much they don't know. They don't want to admit that their beliefs might be outdated, their strategies inefficient, their worldview incomplete. But here's the reality. The discomfort of learning is always cheaper than the cost of ignorance. Ignorance is expensive. It shows up in failed relationships, missed opportunities, wasted time, and repeated mistakes. It keeps people locked in cycles of frustration because they're solving today's problems with yesterday's thinking. And the tragedy is not that they don't have the intelligence to evolve, it's that they stopped trying. They accepted the illusion that they had enough. But the mind does not thrive on enough. It thrives on more. More understanding. More awareness. More perspective. Not because you're chasing some status of being smarter than others, but because you understand that the more you learn, the more capacity you have to live. Learning expands your vocabulary, not just in language, but in life. It gives you new tools for expression, for conflict resolution, for creation. It increases your ability to empathize, to strategize, to lead. And when the storms come, and they always do, it is what you've learned that determines how well you navigate. Not your instincts. Not your intentions. What you know, what you've internalized, what you've practiced, that's what holds when everything else fails. The future doesn't belong to the most charismatic. It belongs to the most adaptable. And adaptability is built on continuous learning. And it's not just about information. Information is cheap. It's everywhere. You can find answers to almost anything in seconds. But learning, that's different. Learning means integration. It means turning knowledge into habit, theory into action, ideas into behavior. It means becoming what you've studied. And that process requires repetition, failure, refinement. It's slow. It's frustrating. It's humbling. But it's also transformative. Because what you learn, you carry. No one can take it. No one can steal it. It becomes part of your arsenal. Part of your edge. Part of your mind's armor. And perhaps most importantly, learning protects you from arrogance. It keeps you from assuming you've arrived. It keeps you hungry. It keeps you aware that there's always more depth to explore, more layers to peel back, more ways to improve, not just for yourself, but for the people you serve, the lives you touch, the impact you're here to make. Because learning is not selfish. The more you know, the more you can give. The more you understand, the better you can lead. The more skilled you are, the more problems you can solve. And solving problems is how you become indispensable in any environment. So never stop learning. Never let a title, a salary, a degree, or a milestone convince you that the work is done. The real work, the inner work, never ends. Because you are not a finished product. You are a system in motion. And if you want that system to remain strong, focused, and relevant, you must feed it. Feed it with knowledge. Feed it with challenges. Feed it with perspectives that stretch you, with disciplines that ground you, with questions that make you uncomfortable. The day you stop learning is the day you start dying. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. The mind was never meant to stay still. It was built to grow. And if you want to control it, if you truly want to master the most powerful tool you will ever own, you must remain its student for life. Because the ones who never stop learning, never stop rising. Chapter 12. The conclusion: become the architect of your own mind. At some point, you have to stop waiting for permission. At some point, you have to stop blaming your past, your parents, your environment, your education, your circumstances, the people who misunderstood you, the moments that hurt you, the systems that failed you. Because whether or not you were responsible for the damage, you are now responsible for the reconstruction. And that reconstruction begins not in the outer world, but in the mind. You cannot build a life of power on a foundation of mental passivity. You cannot rise into the future while dragging the architecture of a broken belief system. If you want to live free, if you want to lead yourself with clarity and intent, if you want to rise beyond the mental noise that's been renting space in your head for far too long, then you must become the architect of your own mind. What does that mean? It means you must take full ownership of the systems that operate inside your thinking. Your belief systems, your internal narratives, your identity structures, your default emotional responses, your habitual patterns of focus, attention, and self-talk. These are not just personality traits. These are installations. They were either installed by you or by someone else. And if someone else wrote the code that's running your life, then you are not free. You are a machine executing someone else's program, unconsciously building a reality that was never yours to begin with. But here's the truth most people never realize. You can rewrite the code. You can re-engineer the structure. You can uproot old beliefs and plant new ones. You can uninstall fear-based assumptions, limitation-based narratives, and replace them with something that actually serves who you're becoming. Your brain is not static. Your personality is not fixed. You are not cement, you are clay. Neuroplasticity is not a theory, it's a biological fact. The mind is rewritable. But rewiring does not happen by inspiration. It happens by intentionality. It happens by repetition. It happens by the consistent application of awareness, choice, and action. Becoming the architect of your mind means treating your thoughts like building material. You do not let just anything enter. You do not let just any voice shape the walls. You choose your inputs deliberately. You filter your language. You question your reactions. You stop saying things like, "I've always been this way," or, "That's just how I think," as if your brain was carved in stone. No, it's malleable. But you've got to treat it like a construction site. You've got to demolish what doesn't work. You've got to dig deep, pour new foundation, raise new pillars, and design it according to your vision, not your trauma. This isn't easy. It never was supposed to be. It takes mental labor, emotional sweat, brutal honesty. You will come face to face with the parts of you that you've used to protect yourself from pain, patterns of avoidance, self-sabotage, procrastination, emotional withdrawal, perfectionism, compulsive validation seeking. But these are not who you are. They are defenses. Shields built by an earlier version of you trying to survive. And now you must ask yourself, do I want to keep surviving, or do I want to start designing? Because control over your mind is not about suppression. It's about transformation. Not about silencing thought, but about creating higher quality thought. Not about removing emotion, but learning how to navigate emotion. Not about becoming robotic, but about becoming intentional. You must stop allowing impulse, distraction, and mental noise to dominate your attention. Your focus is your fuel, and if you let the world hijack it, you've already lost the war before it begins. The mind, left undirected, will serve the loudest voice. If that voice is fear, fear will run your life. If that voice is doubt, doubt will write your future. But if that voice is purpose, if it is vision, if it is your higher self, the architect, the creator, then every part of your life begins to reflect that design. It's not about being positive all the time. It's about being clear about who you are, what you believe, what you're building, what you're no longer tolerating. It's about being strategic, training your mind to work for you, not against you. And it's about being disciplined, doing the daily work of directing your mind where it needs to go, regardless of how you feel. Because how you feel is a signal, not a command. The mature mind listens to emotion but doesn't kneel to it. You can feel fear and still move forward. You can feel tired and still rise. You can feel lost and still choose to act. That's what self-leadership looks like. That's what mental control requires. The ability to make decisions from principle, not from passing emotions. And the deeper truth is this: the external world you build is just an extension of the inner world you've designed. Your relationships, your career, your energy, your habits, your level of peace or anxiety, it all flows from the architecture of your mind. If that structure is chaotic, your life will be chaotic. If that structure is clear, grounded, focused, your actions will reflect that. This is not metaphysical fluff. It is cognitive reality. Your thoughts create your patterns. Your patterns create your behaviors. Your behaviors create your outcomes. And those outcomes reinforce your beliefs, unless you interrupt the cycle and rewire it from the inside out. So let this be the moment. Let this be the day you stop waiting. You have walked through mindset, belief, clarity, purpose, discipline, action, gratitude, adaptability, resilience, and learning, not as disconnected concepts, but as a single path, a singular motion toward one truth. You are the only one who can build the mind you need for the life you want. No one else can do this for you. No one else can carry this responsibility. And no one else can stop you once you decide to take control. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to feel ready. You need to begin daily, relentlessly, intentionally. Audit your thoughts. Question your assumptions. Observe your reactions. Eliminate what doesn't serve. Install what does. Reinforce it with repetition, with action, with vision. And never again hand the keys to your life to emotion, distraction, or fear. Because you are no longer the passenger. You are the architect. You are the builder. You are the operator of this mind. And from this moment forward, you drive. Now go build.